This is another throttle body casting. It's called an SR20. I don't make a lot of these, and I thought I'd just do a video of this one because it has some little tricks that are make it a bit different from other early throttle bodies. There are areas in here that are quite difficult to mould and present some difficulty because the sand that goes in those areas gets too hot. And steam coming from it can damage the casting unless I specifically vent that area, as you'll see shortly. This is one that I made earlier. They do come out quite nicely, and it also has another unique feature in that the core has a specific shape, so it has to be orientated in the mould quite carefully, and I can use these witness lines that come from the parting line of the core mould to help me do that. So right, I'll get rid of that and we'll get into this one. First of all, a little bit of part on the pattern. Brush the majority of it off. Just make certain I get some over those areas that I just touched with a wet finger, and I don't dry it off, it'll stick like crazy to the sand. Yeah, I could do with a little more in there, or just touched it. That'll be right, I think. Okay. Now this little bit of craziness here is simply to keep the fine facing sand where I want it, which is only over the sort of the important bit of the pattern. I don't want to waste it on the rest of the mould at all. Put this here just to hold those back in the right place, and the sprue former now as well. Brush some of the worst of that off, there's still a bit much on the pattern there, I think. Okay, and the final bit of nonsense funnel here. You won't find too many other foundries doing that. I think they're a bit smarter than me. Right, but I don't want to waste this facing sand, and I only want it right over the bits of the pattern that form the eventual casting. That'll do. Now, I like to sieve rather a lot of the backup sand in as well. I've found that there's something in my sand, don't really know what it is, little particles of something, and if they touch the pattern they will produce little dint-like defects in the casting. I wish I knew what they were, but sieving like this seems to get rid of most of them. Also, sieve sand like this rams a lot better. Okay, now to get the bit of funnel out, right. Push it down there with the pan here. Ah, that's a no. Now this is quite difficult to ram, this job, because of the flanges that are on this casting. I have to be very careful. And there's a flange right down there, so I have to be very careful indeed there. There's another flange just under here. Have to be very careful indeed. I mean, you have to ram the sand around it quite well, but you don't want to hit it. There are also some areas in under here that don't ram very well, and you have to do those, be careful to get all those as well. This is only a wooden pattern, and of course if I miss and hit it with the ramming tool, I will damage it quite badly. Now this second ram's much easier because there should be enough sand over the pattern to allow me to ram everywhere. need to just ram there a little bit, and also these areas here are quite thin, they don't ram well, so I'll give them a bit of an extra go. Now I always like to give the ramming tool a quick tap on the bag of parting agent. It puts a bit of a layer on the end and that stops any sticking that might happen. As if you keep doing this without putting the parting agent on, eventually you will get sand build up underneath the bottom of this ramming tool. You will stick to it quite badly. Firm up around the risers and the sprue just to make the edges of them a little bit stronger. Wobble this out, okay. Hold my thumb over this area because if I don't it tends to lift with it because it's parallel there, it doesn't have any taper. Just twist and pull this one out, never wobble a sprue. Slowly, gently pull it out. Ah, come on. Okay, a little bit of parting down each of these 3 holes. This just makes them easier to clean out later. Make certain there's much less chance of loose sand getting down there and staying down there. Always work from the centre of the big holes. Now, break the edge of these and radius the top of the sprue a fair bit. That's not too bad. Now, vents. I have found through a bit of experience that I need vents here and here. One there and there on the end of the flange. And this area here has caused some trouble. Here's one from the cast last time. You can see the discoloured area here, which of course is right opposite there. It suggests there's been some sort of reaction from steam coming out of there with the metal, giving you this grey sort of area. It hasn't worried the casting, but it will produce problems in the bit of metal that I remelt. So I'll just put a vent down here like this to help any steam get out a bit easier rather than attacking the metal. Always when pushing sand back on the bench like this, keep the box up at an angle. Just use the front edge to do the pushing. Only when you got it in the right spot, put it down flat again. That's not too bad. Now, that odd side here doesn't really do the perfect job. I have to sort of push the sand around a bit. Now, I'll just pick this up and put it down again to show you. These areas here, they're quite a thin piece of sand surrounded by a lot of metal, and they are going to cause problems with steam unless I do something about it. So I'll put it back here and carefully get it down on the bench properly again. And I'll put some vents in there. First of all, I'll put a reinforcing nail in this area. That's just an 1¼ inch flathead nail. Now, this piece of linoleum, just to hold the sand down, I just push a vent wire down. This is about a, I suppose about a 3/4 millimetre diameter piece of very hard stainless steel wire. I believe it's the sort of stuff surgeons use to tie your body back together again after you've broken everything. We just put one down there in each of those little areas. A bit of lino just stops the sand pulling up with the thing when you pull it out, so that you get a clean hole. Okay. Or parting agent. That parting agent, incidentally, it's just calcium carbonate, very finely ground calcium carbonate, limestone. In fact, it's cheap. It's about a third the price of talc, and it doesn't contain silica dust like talc does. Now, my lovely little bits of metal funnel don't seem to work with this side of the pattern. I have to resort to this sort of a trick, just confine the parting sand with some rather crappy looking bits of wood. Surprisingly, perhaps it worked rather well. The idea is to use the minimum amount of this fine sand possible. That's not so bad. Now sieve lots of the backup sand again. Get rid of those. As I say, I do like to sieve a lot of this backup sand. It's a bit of a pain, but if you get your sand with the right moisture level so that it sieves fairly easily, it's not too bad. There's an old nail. Worst thing you can do in a foundry is break some glass on the floor, because if the glass gets into your sand, it'll cut your hands to pieces. Very, very fussy about picking any up if you ever do. Right. Again, I have to be a little bit careful about how I ram this, because we've got those flanges still hanging out one side. One there. But once I've got that layer of sand down, I can ram the next layer with a bit more gusto, and I can ram all over. Now I might just use my favourite little tool here. I'll just put that there for the moment to hold the sand. Lovely. There we go. That's the mould rammed up. Now we're ready to get it apart and get the pattern out, of course. Quick loosen first. Get a baseboard. Check that it is actually flat. That's a bit of a curve. That'll do. Not too bad. See if we can get this apart. Now I put my fingers down against the pins there. The palm of my hand holds there, and the fingers will actually follow the pin up as I lift the box. All going well, that is. A bit of a wobble first. Come on, darling, up you come. This box is a bit sticky. Here we go. fingers now are following the pins up and guiding it. Hopefully this is alright. Yes, it's not too bad. That's come out quite well. Some minor edge loss right along there, but it's not too bad. Bit of part on it. Loosen this one. I used to have the pins on this particular box across here, across that way, and the result is that they've only just been converted to that way, and they're still a little tight yet. Right, that'll do. Some edge loss there already. To say, this pattern has not been optimised. If you make a lot of these things, every time you do it, you can find the little undercuts and areas on the pattern that don't draw well and fix them up. But I don't make enough of these to have really done that properly. So I do tend to lose a little edge. Up we come. Now my fingers again this time are against the side of the odd side, and they will help guide it as it comes up. Here we come. There we go. A little bit of edge loss, a little bit around there, a little bit there, and there was a little bit there that I saw before. Just break the edges here, just because they're quite sharp edges where the risers have joined. I'll break them away. Rather I do it now than the metal does it later. Always look down the sprue to make certain it's clear. Pretty annoying to try and pour a casting down a sprue that's blocked with sand. Very carefully blow this out, particularly carefully in here. You can now see the area I put these vents. You see there's going to be a lot of metal surrounding that little peak of sand there and here and here. And if I don't put those vents there, the steam will come out against the metal and produce a somewhat ugly looking casting. That's okay. Now this one, part of the idea of putting the parting agent on is it stops any loose sand that flying around from sticking to the surface of the mould, but also it allows me to see when I've blown it all down properly, because the white vanishes, of course. Okay. As I mentioned before, these cores have got to be put in quite carefully, and they have a lump of steel in them to help hold them down. But without that, they would possibly float up at one end, the end that's under the risers. Now, just very carefully, and then check, and they're not quite right. That's about right, and then it should feel firm and not rock. That one's okay. Now it is. Now that one feels okay. Now, trial close. Okay. extension and the riser extension. Now note that extending the riser and the sprue like this has got nothing to do with increasing pressure on the mould. In fact, I rather wish I didn't have this much pressure in the mould, because it pushes the metal into the sand more and makes a rougher surface. So I'm certainly not doing it to increase pressure at all. All it is to do is to make certain that the risers have enough volume of metal in to feed the casting down below. It's generally, I keep this sort of thing down to an absolute minimum to see, which you do sometimes. Some people extend these things way up here and pour metal from a great height in, and oh, it's a nonsense. An absolute nonsense. All they're doing is increasing the turbulence of fill. And giving themselves a rougher looking casting because of the increased pressure. I'll just check for any loose grains. No, they look pretty good down there. There we go, that's another one done. Here we go, over in front of the furnace, ready to be poured later this afternoon.